Bore St Andrews, it's another Monday Assembly. I hope you've all enjoyed a lovely weekend. I should have been playing some music, but we're having a few issues with the recording on the video tonight. So at the end of this assembly, I'm going to challenge you to find a few different songs related to the theme of my assembly. Now, this week in school, St Andrews, it's only a 4-day week. Friday is a bank holiday for us, which means if we were in school, there would be no school. So that means there's no home learning on Friday. And it's a day for you to spend time with your families. Now, if I show you my little PowerPoint, maybe then we can find out why it's a bank holiday on Friday, because we don't normally have bank holidays on Friday. They're usually on Mondays. However, this Friday is a very special VE celebration day. It's actually the 75th anniversary of VE Day. But what is VE Day? Well, Year 6 will know an awful lot about this, a lot more than the rest of the school. But VE Day celebrates Victory in Europe Day. I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but it signified the end of World War II. So this Friday will be 75 years since the Second World War ended. Now, Britain had been at war since September 1939. The war had caused great hardships for the entire country. Unlike previous wars, the Second World War directly affected more people living in Britain. Air raids where German aeroplanes dropped bombs on important targets killed over 40,000 people. 384,000 British soldiers were killed and many, many more were wounded. It was usually impossible for soldiers to visit home due to the war. And the last photo shows nearly all of the food in the country was rationed. This was to make sure food supplies lasted for the entire time. For example, people were limited to 1 egg per person per week. And people used powdered eggs and things as a substitute, but they weren't very nice. By the end of April 1945, the leader of Italy, Benito Mussolini, and the leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler, were dead. Germany itself was in ruins. You can see here a photograph which shows a picture of the German Parliament building, the Reichstag. This was in ruins after it was bombed. Most of Berlin, the German capital, was in a similar state after the war. On the 7th of May, at 2:41 a.m., very early in the morning, in Rheims in France, Germany surrendered. This meant that the war in Europe was over. Before long, the exciting news spread that the war in Europe was over. People ran out on the streets to celebrate and church bells were rung to spread the news. This is a picture of Sir Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister of Britain at the time. And at 7:40 p.m. on the 7th of May, Winston Churchill made this announcement, which I'm popping up now, which was broadcast on the radio. He said, "In accordance with arrangements between 3 great powers, tomorrow, Tuesday, will be treated as Victory in Europe Day and will be regarded as a holiday." The following day was one of great celebration. Churchill made a speech in which he said, "My dear friends, this is your hour. This is not victory of a party or of any class. It's a victory of the great British nation as a whole." Communities all over Britain had street parties and churches held services of Thanksgiving. You can see here a picture of the royal family on the balcony outside Buckingham Palace in London. There was King George VI, There was Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, his wife, and the princesses Elizabeth and Margaret. They're there with Winston Churchill. Princess Elizabeth is on the left of the photograph. Do you recognise her? This is our Queen before she actually became Queen. Do you know she was only 19 years old at the time? Can you see she's wearing uniform? Well, this is her in her uniform. When she appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, Princess Elizabeth was wearing her ATS uniform. ATS stands for Auxiliary Territorial Service. The ATS was a branch of the British Army for women. At this time, women were not allowed to fight, so members of the ATS undertook different roles, such as drivers or radar operators. Overjoyed at the people's celebrations, the princess asked her parents if she and her sister might join. The Queen and King at the time agreed on the condition that they went in a large group of people who would look after them. Nobody in the crowd realised that two princesses were out celebrating with them. During the celebrations, Churchill reminded people that there were still problems to be faced when he said, "We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing, but let us not forget for a moment the toil and efforts that lie ahead." Do you know what? Although VE Day was a great day of celebration, there were still problems to be faced. Many people were grieving for relatives who died in the war. Cities lay in ruins. Hospitals had been bombed, schools had been bombed, people had lost their houses. Whole cities needed to be rebuilt. And do you know what? Rationing, where you couldn't buy all the food you wanted, that continued for another 9 whole years. Well, we won't be able to celebrate VE Day as we would normally have done by having street parties and going out with friends and neighbours. But if you read my newsletter, which I sent out by email to your mums and dads earlier today, you will see some links, some British Legion resources, but also some really interesting information from the Licence Institute in Lliswerry. The Licence Institute is arranging a virtual VE Day party. They've got a special link on Facebook where you can sign up and take part. There'll be music playing, there's flags and bunting to download and decorate your houses. And I'm really looking forward to all your lovely pictures that I can see of what you're doing. Do you know, this reminded me, this last slide, our time to reflect, of what's happening now in Britain with the coronavirus. In his VE Day speech, Winston Churchill said, "Do not despair, do not yield to violence and tyranny, march straight forward." How can you keep going when you face difficult or worrying times? Well, St. Andrews, you are doing a fantastic job of that. You're sending smiles, you're sending positive messages of hope. Your butterflies, your rainbows, your tweets, all the lovely things you are doing that make people smile, bring some joy to their lives. And you're remembering what you're grateful for. And that's really important. So, St. Andrews, we can keep going in this difficult time, and we will meet again very soon. That brings me on to my challenge to finish. I was hoping to play some music to you, but please can you look online for the song "We'll Meet Again" by Vera Lynn and "The White Cliffs of Dover," also by Vera Lynn. Listen to the lyrics, the words of these songs. I think they're really relevant for now as well. Well, have a lovely 4-day week with your teachers. Have a day off with your families on Friday, and I will see you for Celebration Assembly Thursday this week, and then back on Monday next week for another full week. of work. Double chi blant.